At 75, Richard Gere has reached an age where reflection feels more important than reputation, and perspective matters more than polish. Known for decades as one of Hollywood's most elegant and introspective leading men, Gere has never been drawn to public feuds or loud declarations. Instead, his career has been marked by restraint, discipline, and an almost spiritual distance from celebrity excess. In later interviews and reflective conversations, Gere has spoken not about hatred, but about difficult professional relationships that shaped him just as much as his successes. These moments, often misunderstood by tabloids, were rooted in clashes of temperament, creative philosophy, and maturity rather than personal malice. Gere's willingness to revisit them now is less about naming villains and more about understanding how friction, disappointment, and ego influenced his journey. In doing so, he reframes conflict as an unavoidable part of a long artistic life, not a source of bitterness, but of growth. Early years and the making of a thoughtful actor. Born Richard Tiffany Gere in 1949, his early life in a disciplined, faith-centered household laid the groundwork for the introspective man he would become. Long before Hollywood fame, Gere was a gymnast, musician, and philosophy student, deeply interested in structure, balance, and meaning. His early theater work in the 1970s sharpened his seriousness about acting as craft rather than spectacle, particularly through stage productions that demanded emotional vulnerability and intellectual rigor. This mindset set him apart in an industry increasingly driven by image and bravado. As his film career gained momentum with roles in Days of Heaven and American Gigolo, Gere developed a reputation for quiet intensity and internalized performance. That same seriousness, however, sometimes clashed with co-stars who approached acting as competition or performance dominance, planting the seeds for future professional discomfort rather than outright animosity. Stardom, masculinity, and creative boundaries. Gere's breakthrough success in the 1980s elevated him to global stardom, but it also placed him in environments where ego often overshadowed collaboration. Films like An Officer and a Gentleman and Pretty Woman required chemistry, trust, and mutual respect. Yet, Gere has acknowledged that not every partnership behind the camera mirrored what audiences saw on screen. His approach favored preparation, emotional restraint, and listening, while others thrived on improvisation or constant energy. These differences sometimes led to tension, particularly in high-pressure productions where box office expectations were enormous. Gere has since described these moments not as personal failings, but as mismatches in working styles. To him, acting was never about domination or scene stealing, but about serving the story. When those values were not shared, discomfort inevitably followed, shaping his later preference for smaller, more intimate projects. Early career tensions and learning limits. One of the earliest professional conflicts Gere encountered came at a time when he was still defining himself. In his 20s, navigating film sets alongside equally ambitious peers proved challenging. Gere has reflected that youthful pride, from all sides, often magnified minor disagreements into lasting resentments. He admits that in his early career, he lacked the emotional tools to manage confrontational personalities or competitive atmospheres. Rather than engaging, he tended to withdraw, which sometimes deepened misunderstandings. These early experiences taught him the importance of boundaries and self-awareness. Instead of hardening him, they gradually pushed him toward introspection and spiritual grounding. Gere has emphasized that many of these tensions were less about individual people and more about an industry culture that rewarded dominance over empathy, a lesson that would influence his later choices both professionally and personally, when on-screen chemistry masks off-screen distance. Perhaps the most surprising revelations from Gere's reflections involve partnerships audiences adored. Romantic films rely on illusion, and Gere has acknowledged that genuine warmth on screen does not always require closeness off it. Over time, differing schedules, creative habits, and life stages can quietly erode ease between collaborators. Gere has spoken carefully about these situations, avoiding accusations, and instead highlighting how familiarity can sometimes breed friction. What once felt effortless can become strained when expectations shift. Rather than resentment, Gere describes a sense of emotional distance that made collaboration harder the second time around. These experiences reinforced his belief that timing matters deeply in creative relationships. He views these moments not as betrayals, but as reminders that people evolve, and that even successful partnerships are not guaranteed to age gracefully. Strong personalities and conflicting processes. Gere's career placed him alongside some of the strongest personalities in modern cinema, individuals driven by instinct, improvisation, or sheer force of presence. While he respected talent, Gere often struggled when intensity crossed into unpredictability, or when collaboration gave way to competition. He has explained that his discomfort stemmed from environments where respect felt conditional, or where humor masked insensitivity. Rather than responding publicly at the time, Gere chose silence, focusing on his own work and inner balance. In retrospect, he recognizes that avoidance was both protection and limitation. These interactions taught him the value of clarity and self-respect, even when harmony isn't possible. Gere now frames these encounters as lessons in discernment, helping him understand when to engage deeply and when to step back for his own well-being. Professional rivalries and unspoken resentments. Not all difficult relationships stemmed from personality clashes alone. Gere has acknowledged that professional rivalry, particularly in ensemble casts, sometimes fueled quiet resentment. Favoritism, differing levels of attention, or contrasting career trajectories can distort even respectful working relationships. Gere has spoken about moments when unaddressed insecurities created invisible walls between collaborators. Rather than escalating conflicts, he often internalized frustration, believing that professionalism meant endurance. With age, he recognizes that silence can allow misunderstandings to harden into distance. These experiences reinforced his belief that open communication, though uncomfortable, is healthier than prolonged restraint. Gere's reflections avoid blame, instead highlighting how unspoken competition can quietly undermine trust, even among talented, well-intentioned people. Fame, ego, and the cost of silence. As Gere's fame grew, so did expectations that he remain agreeable and diplomatic at all times. He has admitted that this pressure contributed to his long silence about uncomfortable experiences. Speaking out earlier might have jeopardized roles or strained studio relationships, especially during eras when image management outweighed authenticity. Gere now sees how fame can reward emotional suppression while quietly exacting a personal toll. His Buddhist practice helped him process these experiences internally, transforming frustration into compassion rather than resentment. Instead of harboring anger, he sought understanding, recognizing that ego-driven behavior often masks insecurity. Gere's reflections emphasize that silence kept peace externally, but clarity only came later, when he allowed himself to acknowledge discomfort without judgment. Later, career choices and emotional freedom. In the second half of his career, Gere became more selective, gravitating toward roles and collaborators aligned with his values. Films like Unfaithful and Chicago allowed him to explore maturity, vulnerability, and restraint without constant friction. He credits earlier conflicts for sharpening his instincts, helping him identify environments where mutual respect flourished. Gere has said that emotional freedom comes from choosing alignment over validation. By prioritizing meaning over momentum, he found deeper satisfaction in his work. His humanitarian efforts further grounded him, offering perspective beyond industry tensions. In hindsight, Gere sees every difficult collaboration as part of a larger education, one that guided him toward balance, humility, and purpose, legacy, reflection, and choosing peace. At 75, Richard Gere's reflections are not about settling scores, but about honoring truth without cruelty. He speaks with care, framing difficult relationships as moments of learning rather than sources of bitterness. His legacy, he believes, lies not only in iconic films, but in personal evolution. Gere's willingness to acknowledge discomfort while refusing to vilify others reflects a maturity shaped by time, spirituality, and self-awareness. By sharing these reflections, he offers insight into the emotional realities behind cinematic glamour. His story reminds us that even the most composed figures navigate tension and disappointment. Ultimately, Gere's message is one of reconciliation with the past, with others, and with oneself, choosing peace as the final and most meaningful role of all.